I spent my entire career auditing heartless financial predators, but I never realized the most vicious monsters of all would wear spotless white scrubs, holding a human life for ransom.
Sign it now, or I cut your wife's oxygen in 10 seconds. Dr. Alaric Vane commands coldly, his hand resting heavy on the valve of the very machine keeping my Winifred alive. Through the ICU glass, the woman I've loved for 40 years is clinging to life, her chest shattered and bandaged from that horrific crash. Standing right by her bed, CFO Clement Hargrave casually taps a folder, the mortgage deed to my $1.8 million Chestnut Hill home, against the steel bedrail, reminding me that they don't run a charity here. Me, a retired IRS special agent who spent his entire life putting financial predators behind bars, now standing here with a trembling pen, completely helpless, as these monsters in white coats force me to trade my life savings for my wife's next breath. The sheer humiliation of it suffocates me, dragging me into the darkest corner of my life. What the hell do you do when your wife's heart is beating on their payroll, and you're staring down the barrel of a multi-million-dollar medical shakedown? Smash that subscribe button right now, and drop a comment. How would you break these corrupt vultures if they backed you into a corner like this? The smell of garlic hovered in our kitchen. I had set our finest china for 2. Winifred was supposed to be back by 6. It was now 7:30. Because she was never late, my chest tightened. My old left knee, shattered during an IRS arrest 15 years ago, began to ache, a phantom warning of trouble. My phone vibrated. I swiped to answer immediately. "Winifred? Is this Benedict Gidley?" A young, breathless voice stammered. "Yes, this is Benedict," I said, my grip tightening on the counter. "Who is this?" "My name is Giles Overton, Mr. Gidley," the voice rushed. "I'm an R nurse at Mercygate Private Hospital. Your wife was just brought in by paramedics." The floor tilted. "What happened? Is she conscious? Tell me she's okay." "She was struck by a delivery truck on Germantown Avenue," Giles said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "A hit and run, Mr. Gidley. She has severe blunt force chest trauma. Her cardiac rhythm is unstable. You need to get here right now. She's barely hanging on." "Is she breathing?" I gasped. "Is her pacemaker holding up?" "She's stabilized under a ventilator," Giles replied quickly. "But the trauma is putting massive stress on her heart. Please, hurry." My foot shook on the brake pedal during the rainy drive. I arrived at Mercygate, soaked in sweat. "I'm Benedict Gidley," I gasped to the receptionist. "My wife, Winifred Gidley, she was just brought in. Mr. Gidley." A calm, smooth voice cut through. I turned. A tall man in a pristine white lab coat stood there, his silver hair combed, his eyes cool behind designer glasses. His badge read Dr. Alaric Vane, Chief of Emergency Medicine. "Dr. Vane," I said, stepping forward. "Is she in surgery? Please tell me she's in the OR." "She's in our cardiac ICU, currently stabilized under a high-pressure ventilator," Dr. Vane said, his voice dripping with practiced, professional empathy. He gently pat my hand off his coat sleeve. "The blunt force from the collision caused her diseased mitral valve to completely rupture. She is experiencing acute pulmonary edema. If we do not operate immediately to reconstruct the valve, her lungs will drown in her own blood." "Then why aren't you operating?" My voice cracked. "Why is she still sitting in the ICU?" "Every second counts." "Mercygate is a private institution, Mr. Gidley," Dr. Vane replied, gesturing toward a glass door down the hallway. "We have the best surgical team in Philadelphia, but certain protocol guidelines must be met first. Let's step into my office. We need to discuss the logistical details of her procedure." "Logistical details?" I stared at him, my blood running cold. "My wife is dying, and you want to discuss logistics." "Please, Benedict," Vane said, opening the door. "It will only take a moment. This is how we ensure the highest standard of care." My internal alarm bells screamed. Logistical details belonged in billing, not the ER. But with Winifred on a ventilator, I had to follow. Inside the office sat Clement Hargrave, the CFO. "Please sit, Mr. Gidley," Hargrave said, sliding a thick blue folder toward me. "I don't want to sit," I said, my voice hardening. "My wife is dying down the hall. Why is she not in surgery?" "Because Winifred's condition requires a highly specialized, minimally invasive reconstruction technique," Dr. Vane said, leaning against the edge of the mahogany desk. "And because Mercygate is a premier private facility, that specific cardiac package is classified as an out-of-network, elective service." "Elective?" I stared at him, dumbfounded. "She was run over by a truck. Her heart is failing. The emergency stabilizing care was covered." "Yes," Hargrave chimed in, his gold watch catching the light as he tapped a finger on the folder. "But the definitive surgical repair, that requires a specialized surgical team and proprietary equipment. Our hospital policy is very clear. Out-of-network major surgeries must be secured up front." "Secured how?" I asked, my hands clenching into fists inside my pockets. "What does that mean?" "We require a special out-of-network service deposit," Hargrave said, opening the folder to reveal a single-page agreement. $250,000. Cash, cashier's check, or a certified deed of equity. We understand you own a beautiful historic estate on Chestnut Hill, Mr. Gidley. If you sign this temporary deed collateral agreement tonight, we can bypass the standard bank clearance, wait and wheel your wife into the operating room immediately." "You're asking me to mortgage my home in the middle of a medical emergency?" I whispered. "That's insane. We are giving you a path to save your wife, Benedict," Dr. Vane said, his voice dropping into a cold transactional tone. "The choice is yours. But I must be frank. Winifred's heart cannot sustain this level of trauma for long. If the agreement is not signed and notarized by midnight, we will be forced to transition her off the intensive ventilator and transfer her to a county facility. She won't survive the ambulance ride." "This is extortion," I spat. "This is a shakedown. You are holding my wife hostage." "This is private healthcare, Mr. Gidley," Hargrave said, completely unfazed. "We don't run a charity. The paperwork is ready. All we need is your signature." "What if I refuse?" I asked, looking him dead in the eye. "What if I walk out and call the Department of Health?" "They will tell you the same thing, Benedict." Dr. Vane sighed, checking his luxury watch. "Mercygate has no legal obligation to perform non-stabilizing, advanced specialty procedures on out-of-network patients. We have met our legal emergency requirements. The rest is up to you. But as I said, you have 20 minutes. After that, we transition her off our equipment." "Is that a threat, Vane?" I whispered, my voice shaking with rage. "You would let her suffocate over a financial transaction?" "It's not a threat, Mr. Gidley," Hargrave interrupted, his voice smooth as grease. "It's simply how the system operates. We can't fund advanced cardiology out of our own pockets. We need collateral." "You have no conscience," I said, staring at them. "None at all." "Conscience doesn't pay for the medical-grade equipment keeping your wife alive," Vane said, crossing his arms. "So do we have an agreement, or should we prepare the transfer papers?" I looked through the office window, down the long corridor toward the ICU where Winifred lay. I thought about her laugh, her love for old books, the way she held my hand when my knee ached. I knew if I fought them, they'd let her die under the cover of a medical complication. Their arrogance made them believe I was helpless. They didn't see the trap I was building. I don't have that kind of cash," I stammered, letting my hands shake, pretending to break. "My retirement, it's tied up. But the house is worth $1.8 million. I'll sign." "We know, Benedict," Dr. Vane said, a faint smug smile touching his lips. "And that's more than enough collateral. Sign page 3. Let's get your wife into the oar." My hand trembled as I took the pen from Hargrave's desk. I signed my name, Benedict Gidley, on the bottom page. But because I knew their system, I omitted my registered IRS digital security marker, a tiny double loop-D in my first name. Without it, the document was a legal dead letter. "Excellent," Hargrave smiled, stamping the document with a heavy thud. "Dr. Vane, prep the team. Vane nodded, heading out the door. We'll begin the incision in 10 minutes, Mr. Gidley. You did the right thing. They wheeled Winifred toward the surgery suite. The moment the red light lit up, I walked toward the exit. I pulled my secondary encrypted mobile phone from my pocket and dialed a direct, scrambled line to the federal building downtown. The call connected on the second ring. Craddock, a gruff voice answered. Leo, I said, my voice dead, cold, and razor-sharp. It's Benedict Gidley. I need you to activate a red notice audit on Mercygate Private Hospital. I just signed a $250,000 federal extortion receipt. Benedict? Leo gasped. What are you talking about? Your wife. Winifred is on the table right now. I cut him off, staring at the red surgery light. They're extorting my house to keep her breathing. Get your CI team ready, Leo. We're going to audit these monsters until they bleed. The hum of the surgical air conditioning was a low mechanical rattle that vibrated straight through my bad knee. Because the surgical lights down the corridor remained a stark, unforgiving red, I sat frozen on the vinyl bench in the waiting room, my eyes locked on the double doors. I was a man who spent 30 years tracing offshore shell accounts in windowless federal basements, yet staring at those stainless steel doors made me feel like an amateur. Benedict, a low voice rasped. I didn't turn my head because I already knew the heavy, flat footfalls. Leopold Craddock. He sat down beside me, the scent of cheap diner coffee and cold rain clinging to his heavy trench coat. My boys ran the expedited check, Benedict, Leo murmured, his eyes scanning the empty corridor. Because you gave us the Ean of Mercygate and that routing number from the escrow agreement, we bypassed the local treasury loop. You hit a goddamn vein. What did you find? I asked, my voice dry as dust. Vane Hargrave Holdings LLC isn't an out-of-network billing entity, Leo said, his voice dropping into a razor-thin whisper. It's a Delaware-registered shell. It has a single utility account and zero payroll. Because the funds are routed through an intermediary bank in Panama, the hospital CFO, Clement Hargrave, has been skimming money directly from patients under the guise of elective specialty deposits to cover his personal real estate losses in the Jersey Shore. It's a textbook Medicare kickback scheme. And Alaric Vane? I asked, my fingers curling around my cane. Vane is the hunter, Leo muttered. He target selects wealthy families in the ER. Because they're in shock, they sign whatever he puts in front of them. Our Treasury auditors are flagging 18 similar collateralized deposits over the last fiscal year. But because the victims are too humiliated to report it, the hospital covers it up as post-operative care defaults. It's clean, Benedict. Or at least it was, until they targeted an IRS special agent. My signature won't clear, I whispered. Because I left out my digital audit marker, the title company will flag the escrow transfer as unverified. They have 12 hours before the bank calls Hargrave. Which means they're going to push you for a formal, notarized signature to cure the defect, Leo warned. Hargrave is a paranoid bastard. Because he knows the audit window is closing on their next quarterly report, he will want that Chestnut Hill deed locked down before sunrise. You have to buy us time, Benedict. If they realize we're sniffing around, they'll scrub the database. Can you play the broken old man a little longer? I'll buy you the hours, Leo, I said, my chest tightening. But my wife is behind those doors. If they catch on, if Vane plays dirty on the operating table. They won't, Leo said, standing up. He dropped a tiny encrypted receiver into my coat pocket. Keep this in your ear. I have a surveillance van parked 3 blocks down. We're tapping the hospital's outbound data. Don't do anything stupid, okay? Because Leo moved toward the emergency exit, I was left alone again under the buzzing fluorescent bulbs. My chest felt tight. A heavy pressure building because I couldn't protect Winifred from the very system that was supposed to save her. Mr. Gidley? A soft, hesitant voice broke the silence. I looked up. It was Giles Overton, the young R nurse who had called me earlier. He was holding a blood pressure cuff, his face pale, his eyes darting toward the security desk. "Nurse Overton," I said, sitting up. Is there any word from the OR? "The bypass pump is still running, Mr. Gidley," Giles whispered, wrapping the black cuff around my arm. He leaned in, pretending to listen to my pulse with his stethoscope. "But you need to hear this, because I was on the intake log when your wife arrived. I noticed something wrong." "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "What was wrong with the log? The ambulance arrived at 10:15. Giles whispered, his eyes wide. "But because Dr. Vane ordered us to hold the intake registration, she wasn't entered into the system until 11 o'clock. He claimed there was a billing database error. But I saw him on his personal phone with Hargrave in the hallway. They were checking your public asset profile, Mr. Gidley. They delayed her treatment on purpose to make sure you were desperate enough to sign." My blood turned to liquid ice. "They let her suffocate for 45 minutes to check my net worth?" "Yes," Giles whispered, "and because I knew that was a violation of the EMTALA federal emergency law, I pulled the raw server audit log. It proves the timestamp was manually overwritten by Vane's terminal." Giles slipped a tiny black USB drive from his pocket, sliding it under the sleeve of my coat as he deflated the pressure cuff. "Take it," Giles urged. "If Vane finds out I pulled this, he'll ruin me. But I couldn't let them do this to another family. I've seen 3 patients die of sudden complications after their families refused to sign those folders. Don't trust them, Mr. Gidley." "Thank you, Giles," I said, my voice shaking with a quiet, lethal fury. "I won't let your name appear on the audit sheets. I promise you." "Just be careful," Giles said, pulling the cuff away. "They own the security team here. If they suspect you, Mr. Gidley." A sharp, grating voice cut through the sterile air. I turned. Clement Hargrave was marching down the corridor, flanked by a tall man in a dark charcoal suit who carried a heavy leather briefcase. "Clement," I said, my voice flat, "is the surgery over?" "We have a slight administrative hiccup, Benedict," Hargrave said, stopping in front of me. He didn't look at Giles, who quickly shuffled away toward the nurse's station. "This is Arthur Pendleton, our corporate counsel. Because your signature on the emergency escrow agreement had a slight discrepancy in the verification loop, the county registry couldn't process the immediate title lien on the Chestnut Hill property." "A discrepancy?" I asked, letting my head drop, pretending to rub my eyes in sheer exhaustion. "I'm sorry." My hand was shaking. "I haven't slept in 36 hours. Winifred's heart. I can't think straight. What discrepancy?" "We understand completely, Mr. Gidley," Pendleton, the lawyer said, opening his briefcase on the small waiting room table. "Because of that, we've prepared a formalized, notarized amendment. Once you sign this under a registered notary, the title company will clear the transaction immediately. If we don't resolve this now, we may have to suspend the post-operative ICU allocation for your wife. We need to protect our overhead. Suspend her care?" I looked up, letting my eyes water, letting them see a broken old man who was ready to crawl. "She's in surgery right now. You can't just stop." "The surgery's nearly complete, Benedict," Hargrave said, leaning in, his voice slick. "But the recovery suite, the specialized medication that costs $50,000 a day. Without a secured deed, we simply cannot authorize her transfer to the ICU. You want her to wake up in a safe room, don't you?" "Of course you do." Yes, of course," I whimpered, grabbing the pen Pendleton offered. "I'll sign. Just, please, let me see her first. Let me see her breathe." "Sign the document first, Mr. Gidley," Pendleton insisted, pointing to the yellow highlighted line. "Then we'll have our in-house notary stamp it. Once the ink is dry, you can see her." My phone buzzed in my pocket. A silent vibration. I looked at the screen under the table. It was an encrypted text from Giles Overton. "Vane just noticed the audit logs were accessed. He's looking for the terminal ID. Security is checking the hallway cameras right now. Get out." Morning light in Philadelphia brought no warmth. It only dyed the ICU window a flat, sterile grey. Because Winifred's chest was bandaged under wires, her ventilator's hiss felt like a countdown. I sat beside her, holding her hand. Because Giles warned me security was reviewing hallway tapes, I kept my cane close to my bad knee. The door slid open. Giles Overton stepped in with IV bags, his face pale. "Mr. Gidley," Giles whispered, pretending to inspect the heart monitor. "You've got to be careful. Because I pulled those audit logs, Dr. Vane is on a rampage. He knows there's a leak, and security is tracking my system ID right now." "Did they track the login to your credentials, Giles?" I asked, my voice barely a breath. "Not yet," Giles whispered, hanging a saline bag. "But because they're tracking the network, we're on borrowed time. Hargrave knows your deed signature was a dummy. They're bringing more paperwork, Benedict. You can't stay here. If they run your name through the federal database..." "I'm not going anywhere, Giles." I cut him off, my eyes remaining on Winifred's pale face. "Because my wife is still breathing through their machines. I'm staying right in this chair." "They're coming," Giles hissed, stepping back as heavy footsteps echoed outside. "Oh God." I slipped the USB drive into my pocket, next to my transmitter. The doors swung wide. Dr. Alaric Vane strode in, white coat billowing, followed by Clement Hargrave and a bald notary. 2 security guards stood outside, blocking the exit. "Nurse Overton," Dr. Vane said, his voice cold as a steel tray. "Leave us now." "Yes, doctor," Giles mumbled, grabbing his empty tray and slipping past them. Hargrave closed the door, turning the deadbolt with a cold click. "Benedict," Hargrave said, his voice flat as concrete, "we're done playing games. Because your title company flagged the deed transfer this morning, we know you played us. You're a clever old bastard, aren't you?" A wrench?" I asked, letting my voice shake, letting my jaw slacken slightly. I don't understand. I signed the paper. I gave you the Chestnut Hill deed. My hand, it was so cold last night. I did what you asked." "Save the act, Gidley," Dr. Vane spat, tapping the bed rail. "Because you're a retired bureaucrat, you thought you could slide a bad signature past us. You left off your security marker. The bank rejected the filing at 8:30. The bank?" I stammered, pulling my collar tight, pretending to shrink back into the chair. I must have forgotten. My head. I'm 63, Alaric. My wife's heart. When I saw her in that ambulance, my mind just went blank. I don't know anything about digital markers. We don't care about your mind, Benedict." Hargrave sneered, tossing a blue folder onto Winifred's bedsheet over her stomach. "But because we care about our security, you're going to cure the defect, right here, right now. This is a legalized, notarized affidavit of title transfer. Once you sign this in front of our registered notary, the property belongs to Vane Hargrave Holdings." "And if I don't?" I asked, letting my eyes water as I stared at the folder. She just came out of major surgery. You said the bypass went well. You said she was stable. The surgery went beautifully." Dr. Vane smiled, a slow, terrifying curve of his lips. "Because I am a master of my craft, Benedict. But because cardiothoracic recovery is an incredibly volatile process, Winifred's stability is highly conditional. It depends entirely on my goodwill." "What are you saying?" I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs, not from fear, but from the raw, primitive urge to strangle the man. "I'm saying that her new mitral valve is held together by microscopic Gore-Tex sutures," Vane said, his fingers moving to the plastic tube of Winifred's ventilator. "If her blood pressure spikes, those sutures will rip. Because I am her primary physician, I am the only one who can write the orders for the specialized vasodilator medication keeping her pressure low. Without those drugs, her heart rate will skyrocket. She will bleed out internally in less than 5 minutes. It would look like an unfortunate, post-operative stroke. Tragic, common, totally unprovable. You would murder my wife over a piece of land?" My voice was barely a whisper. "You took an oath, Vane." "I took an oath to practice medicine, Benedict, not to fund your wife's luxury recovery," Vane sneered. And because we are running a multi-million-dollar facility, we don't have room for charity cases who try to play legal tricks with their assets. We aren't murdering anyone, Benedict, Hargrave corrected, his voice slick as oil as he unscrewed the cap of a heavy gold fountain pen and held it out. We're simply managing our risks. Because you tried to cheat us with a dummy signature, we are establishing our leverage. You sign the paper, the notary stamps it, and Dr. Vane keeps her pressure stable. It's a very simple, very fair exchange. And if I walk out that door? I asked, my hand slowly reaching toward my pocket, where the encrypted transmitter was silently broadcast streaming to Leo's van. You won't make it to the elevator, Hargrave said, pointing to the security guards outside. Because we will immediately declare you mentally incompetent due to acute emotional trauma. We'll have security escort you from the premises, and because Dr. Vane is her legal medical proxy, in the absence of a verified family financial agreement, he will sign the order to transition her to palliative care. She'll be dead before you reach the parking lot. I looked down at Winifred's chest, rising with a dry hiss. Because I had spent my career auditing ruthless criminals, I knew their arrogance was their absolute vulnerability. They believed their white coats and hospital boardrooms made them untouchable, and a limping retired agent was just an easy mark. Because they were so focused on their target, they missed the web I had already spun around them. I see, I whispered, letting my chin sink to my chest. You have thought of everything. I don't have a choice. Because we are professionals, Benedict, Dr. Vane said, his voice dripping with triumphant pride. Now, pick up the pen. My hand shook violently as I took the pen, letting it rattle against my fingernails. Leaning over the bed, my eyes locked on the highlighted line. My hand, I mumbled, letting my elbow wobble. I can't keep it steady. The stress, it's too much. Hold it with both hands, Gidley, Hargrave snapped, stepping closer. Just scribble the name. We don't have all day. I'm trying. Please, I whimpered. I positioned the pen, but because I had to buy another 30 seconds for Leo's team to finalize the asset freeze, I let my hand slip. The nib dragged across the paper, tearing a jagged hole. In my mock struggle, my elbow knocked the small medical tray. A cup of black antiseptic fluid tipped over, splashing a dark puddle across the white sheets and the folder. Damn it, Gidley! Hargrave roared, grabbing the ruined, ink-stained document. Look at what you did. You did that on purpose. No, no, I cried out, shrinking back, my hands held up in mock terror. I'm sorry, my hand, it just spasmed. The stress, my heart is failing too. Please don't let her die. I don't care about your heart. Hargrave snarled, trying to wipe the dark fluid off the document with his sleeve. The notary seal is soaked. This paper is ruined. We have to print another copy. Get another copy, Clement, Dr. Vane said, his voice a cold, venomous hiss. He stepped forward, his eyes locking onto mine with a sudden, vicious realization. He saw through my weakness. He saw the cold, unblinking focus hidden beneath my tears. Wait a minute, Vane whispered, his hand reaching out. He didn't grab the paper. Instead, his fingers wrapped around the main oxygen flow valve of Winifred's ventilator. You're stalling, Benedict, Vane said, his face inches from mine, his silver hair catching the fluorescent light. I don't have time to play shaking hand games with you, Gidley. Sign it now, or I cut your wife's oxygen in 10 seconds. He gripped the plastic valve, his knuckles turning white as he stared me down. 1, Vane counted. The plastic valve of Winifred's oxygen line clicked under Dr. Alaric Vane's fingers, a tiny cold snap that sounded like a dry bone breaking. 1, Vane whispered, his eyes drilling into mine behind his designer frames. Do you hear that, Benedict? That's the sound of your wife's lungs losing their cushion. Sign the document, or she's gone. Because he was so convinced of his own godhood, he didn't notice my fingers relaxing on the steel handle of my cane. Because he saw only a trembling, broken retiree, he didn't see the veteran special agent who had spent 30 years staring down much bigger sharks in the federal bureaus. I slowly stood up, my back straightening as the fake tremors in my hands vanished. I heard you, Alaric, I said, my voice dropping its frail rattle, replaced by the flat, leaden tone of a federal auditor. But because you're a surgeon, you only understand physical pressure. You don't understand financial load-bearing. You never did. Clement Hargrave stepped back, his pen clutched like a weapon. What the hell are you doing, Gidley? Pick up the pen and sign. Now! We don't have all day. I don't need to sign, Clement, I said, leaning my weight onto my cane. Because the deed you're holding in your hand, the one you tried to file this morning, is already flagged as a federal forged instrument. Forged, Hargrave spat. That's a legally certified document. You signed it yourself last night. I signed it, yes, I replied, looking him in the eye. But because I left my registered security digital marker off that signature, the title company didn't just reject it. They routed it directly to the Philadelphia Treasury Department. It's a built-in silent alarm. Vane's hand froze on the oxygen valve. His silver hair caught the harsh blue tint of the ICU monitor. What are you talking about? You're a retired clerk. You're bluffing. You don't have that kind of pull. You should have checked my full file, Alaric, I said, reaching for my right cufflink. I unclipped the small silver bar, exposing a microscopic red LED blinking in the center. Because you were so eager to audit my home's equity, you forgot that some IRS CI retirees don't actually retire. They just change their status. This little piece of silver? It's a military-grade digital microphone. Surveillance? Vane breathed. You wired this room? Because it's connected to an active federal surveillance bridge, I explained. Every word you've said about cutting my wife's oxygen has just been recorded on a secure server at the federal courthouse downtown. Hargrave's face went from pale to a greasy, mottled grey. He's wired. Vane, he's wearing a wire. I told you we should have checked his background. Shut up! Clement, Vane snapped, his voice cracking with a sudden vicious panic. So what? You got us on tape making threats. It's your word against ours in a medical malpractice suit. No local judge is going to shut down a major private facility over some verbal sparring in an ICU. We own this town's health board. This isn't a malpractice suit, Alaric, I said, stepping closer to Winifred's bed, shielding her with my body. Because 30 minutes ago, my former colleague, Leopold Craddock, executed an emergency freeze order under the Hobbs Act. The Hobbs Act? Hargrave stammered. That's for racketeering. We are a hospital. Every single asset belonging to Vane Hargrave Holdings LLC has been frozen. I continued. Your offshore account in Panama? Closed. Your real estate assets in Jersey Shore? Placed under federal receivership. By 9:30, the Philadelphia Police and the IRS Criminal Investigation Division will have sealed your executive offices. Hargrave grabbed his phone, his thumb smashing against the screen. No, it's blocked. The Treasury interface is saying entity suspended. Vane, the bank accounts, they're gone. The payroll lines are frozen. We can't clear the wires. How? Vane whispered, his hand dropping from the oxygen valve. We have the best tax attorneys in the state. Our shell companies are completely insulated. They're clean. They were insulated from local auditors, Alaric, I said, letting a cold, humorless smile touch my lips. But because you targeted patients under Medicare-funded programs, you committed federal healthcare fraud. And because you used interstate wire systems to transfer those elective deposits, you triggered the federal extortion laws under the Hobbs Act. You didn't just break the law, you invited the entire federal government into your ledger. You old bastard, Hargrave hissed, moving toward the door. We'll fight this. We'll have this warrant thrown out before lunch. My attorneys will have you. The heavy deadbolt on the ICU door clicked. The door slid open, but it wasn't the security guards. Leopold Craddock stepped into the room, his heavy wet trench coat dripping onto the linoleum floor. Behind him, 4 uniformed federal marshals moved in, their handguns drawn but kept low. Clement Hargrave, Leo said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. By authority of the Federal District Court of Eastern Pennsylvania, I am serving you with an immediate arrest warrant for extortion, Medicare fraud, and tax evasion. Hands on your head, do it now. Extortion? Hargrave squeaked, his voice cracking. That's a lie! We did nothing of the sort. We have you on 2 separate federal taps, Clement. Leo barked, nodding to the marshals. Save the denials for the grand jury. Hands on your head. Leo, Hargrave gasped, his voice cracking like dry wood. Wait, we can talk about this. The hospital board, we have agreements. The board is currently cooperating with our Treasury team, Clement, Leo said, gesturing to the marshals. They're already dumping your server files. Cuff him. A marshal stepped forward, forcing Hargrave's arms behind his back. The ratcheting sound of the steel handcuffs was the loudest noise in the room. Alaric! Hargrave screamed as he was led out. Do something! You're the chief! Call the mayor! But Dr. Alaric Vane didn't move. He stood frozen beside Winifred's ventilator, his breathing shallow, his face a mask of cold, concentrated rage. His eyes weren't on the marshals. They were on me. You think you won, Benedict? Vane whispered, his voice shaking with a terrifying, manic intensity. You think your federal badges can save her? You're playing with her life. The game is over, Vane, I said, resting my hand on my cane. Step away from my wife. Now. No, it's not over, Vane sneered, his fingers suddenly flying to the digital control panel of Winifred's cardiac monitor. He slammed his palm against the emergency manual override button. The heart monitor began to beep in a frantic, irregular rhythm. The green line on the screen spiked, then plunged into a jagged, chaotic wave. What did you do? I roared, lunging forward, but my bad knee buckled, forcing me to catch myself on the edge of the bed. Because she just came off the bypass pump, her arterial walls are incredibly fragile. Vane laughed, his face twisted with the manic triumph of a cornered predator. I just shut off the vasodilator drip. Her systolic pressure is climbing past 200. Her heart is tearing itself apart. If those sutures in her mitral valve tear, she will bleed out internally in less than 60 seconds. You're a murderer, Vane, I shouted, clutching my knee. Only if she dies, Benedict, Vane mocked. And right now, you're the one holding the stopwatch. Ross, get the medical team in here, Leo shouted, rushing toward the door. There is no medical team, Vane screamed, backing toward the corner of the room, his hands held high. I am the only board-certified cardiothoracic surgeon in this entire facility who knows how to perform the secondary repair if those sutures pop. You're a monster, Alaric, I growled, clutching my knee. A cold-blooded monster. If you touch me, if you arrest me, she dies on this bed, Vane shrieked. You need me, Benedict. You need me to keep her alive. So what's it going to be? Do you want justice? Or do you want a dead wife? The alarm on the ventilator began to shriek, a red light flashing against the grey morning fog outside the window. Winifred's chest began to heave. Benedict! Leo gasped, his hand hovering over his holster. What do we do? She's flatlining. I don't know, I yelled, my eyes doting from Vane's smirk to the dying monitor. I don't know. 2? Dr. Alaric Vane's voice was a low, dry scalpel, his fingers tightening on the black plastic valve of Winifred's oxygen line. Don't test me, Gidley. Because you think you're a clever taxman, you think you can play games with me. Your little IRS friends can't sew a torn aorta. I turn this knob, and your wife suffocates before they even clear the lobby. Alaric, please, I whispered, letting my knees buckle, leaning heavily on my cane. I'll sign. I'll write the security marker. Just don't touch the line. Please. That's more like it. Clement Hargrave smiled, his slick, gold-ringed fingers holding out a fresh, dry copy of the Chestnut Hill deed transfer. Because you finally understand how the world works, Benedict. The house for her life. It's a very simple transaction. Sign the damn line. Arthur, check the ledger again, Hargrave called out to the lawyer. Is his escrow clearance verified? No, Clement, Arthur Pendleton said, peering at his tablet. The digital signature loop is still pending. We need a live notary stamp on the secondary affidavit to trigger the title transfer immediately. We don't care about your pending loops, Hargrave snapped, pushing the pen into my palm. Grab the pen, press down hard, sign it. I can't keep my hand steady, I mumbled, reaching out. The medication, it's making me dizzy. You're too arrogant to look at my cufflink, Alaric, I whispered, keeping my eyes low. You didn't even notice the small blinking green light, did you? A green light? Vane sneered. What the hell are you mumbling about, Gidley? You're losing your mind. Crash. Federal agents. Step away from the equipment. Hands on your heads. Special Agent Leopold Craddock burst through, a tactical Glock raised, flanked by 3 federal agents in blue windbreakers. Now, move away from the bed, Hargrave gasped, dropping the folder. What? What is this? Arthur, do something. I'm just the corporate counsel. Arthur took one look at the federal badges and raised his hands instantly. I have nothing to do with medical operations. This is all billing. Get on the floor, Hargrave. Don't look at him. Look at me, Leo bellowed, his agents slamming the CFO against the wall. Clement Hargrave, you are under arrest for federal extortion under the Hobbs Act, conspiracy, and Medicare fraud. You can't arrest me, Hargrave shrieked, his face pressed against the glass. Arthur! What are they doing? Call the board of directors. They can't do this inside an active hospital. I'm not calling anyone, Clement, Arthur yelled, his hands high in the air. They have a federal warrant signed by a district magistrate. This is a clean sweep. Because you used mail fraud, wire fraud, and medical duress to secure it, Clement. Leo barked, pushing him toward the door. Your corporate shield just became your prison cell. Your shell company, Vane Hargrave Holdings, was frozen 10 minutes ago by the IRS Treasury Division. Every cent of your Panama accounts is gone. No, that's impossible, Hargrave whimpered, his slick confidence dissolving into desperate tears. You can't freeze those. They are private offshore assets. Offshore means nothing to the CID, Hargrave, Leo sneered. Now move, but because Alaric Vane was a cornered beast, he didn't raise his hands. Instead, his fingers slammed down on the digital keypad of Winifred's medication pump, overriding the vasodilator safety. Beep, 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 get back! Vane screamed, his eyes bloodshot, his silver hair disheveled. Get the hell back, because I just killed the vasodilator drip. Her arterial sutures are going to rip. If you touch me, I won't reverse the override. She'll stroke out right in front of you. Step away from the machine, Vane, Leo shouted, his gun aimed dead center at Vane's chest. Step away now! No, Vane laughed, a high manic rattle. Because you think you can arrest me? I am the chief of emergency medicine. I am the only surgeon in this entire county licensed to perform a revision on that specific prosthetic valve. If you cuff me, she dies. You need me. Gidley, tell this federal pig to lower his gun or watch your wife bleed to death. Is that your final play, Alaric? I asked, standing straight. My hand stopped shaking. I leaned my cane against the wall and looked Vane dead in the eye. What are you looking at, old man? Vane snarled. You think you can beat me? I own this hospital. Because you are so arrogant, Alaric, I said, my voice absolutely flat. You never checked who else was on my private payroll. You don't payroll anyone here, Gidley. Vane spat. You're a retired pen pusher. Actually, he payrolls me, a voice called out. I turned toward the glass door. Giles, bring him in. The sliding doors parted. Giles Overton stepped in, his face resolute. Beside him was a tall, older man with sharp blue eyes and a white lab coat. Dr. Marcus Vance. Marcus? Dr. Vance? Vane's jaw dropped. What are you doing here? You're retired. Because Benedict Gidley called me 3 hours ago, Alaric, Dr. Marcus Vance said, his voice carrying the calm authority of a medical legend. And because I was the one who literally wrote the surgical curriculum you failed twice at UPenn, I know exactly how to manage a mitral valve crisis. Step away from my patient. This is my ICU, Vane screamed. You can't just take over. Actually, he can. Special Agent Ross said, stepping into the room with a federal emergency medical proxy. Because you are currently being stripped of your medical license under an emergency federal injunction, Dr. Vane. You have no authority here. Move. This is a conspiracy, Vane shrieked, his voice cracking as Vance pushed him aside. You can't do this to me. I built this department. You built an extortion ring, Alaric, Dr. Vance said, calmly adjusting the digital medication pump. And you did it poorly. Giles, prep 50 milligrams of nitroprusside. Let's get her rhythm back to baseline. Yes, doctor, Giles said, moving with swift, professional precision. Drip is running. Pressure is dropping. 140, 120. She's stabilizing. Good, Dr. Vance murmured. The sutures are holding perfectly. You did fine work, Giles. Vane's shoulders slumped as his leverage evaporated. An agent twisted his arms behind his back. Clack, clack. Alaric Vane, Leo said, reading from a small card. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. Benedict, please, Vane gasped, looking at me as they dragged him toward the door. We can make a deal. I can give you names. The whole board was in on it. Talk to the prosecutor, Vane, I said, my voice dead and cold, because I don't negotiate with tax evaders who trade in human blood. The room cleared, leaving only the soft, steady hum of the ventilator. She's going to make a full recovery, Benedict, Dr. Vance said, a gentle smile on his face. Because you kept your head, you saved her life twice over. Thank you, Marcus, I whispered, sitting back down beside Winifred. The morning sun broke through the grey fog. Winifred's eyes fluttered open, looking up at me. Benedict, she breathed under the plastic mask. Is it over? It's over. Sweetheart, I whispered, kissing her forehead. We're going home. Because I had spent my life searching for financial predators, I knew their greed would always leave a trail. But because I almost lost the only thing that mattered to me, I learned that some boundaries must be defended with absolute steel. If you are facing monsters who try to trade your family's safety for their greed, do not panic, do not compromise. Build your defense. Gather your receipts, and let the law do the heavy lifting. Thank you for standing by me through this dark journey. If you believe these white-collar vultures got what they deserved, please subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button and leave a comment below. Let me know, how would you have handled Dr. Vane if he held your family's life in his hands? Keep your assets secure and your eyes wide open.